The rain came down in sheets the day Michael Langford moved into the old Victorian house on Black Hollow Lane. The air was thick with mist, and the driveway was so overgrown with moss it looked like nature had tried to reclaim the land. Michael, a recently divorced journalist in his late 30s, wasn't looking for perfection. He wanted solitude, a place to breathe, to write, to recover. The house, 3 stories tall, built in 1898, complete with creaking banisters and ivy-choked chimneys, offered just that. The price had been a steal, almost suspiciously low, but the realtor brushed it off with a practiced smile. "Old houses don't sell like they used to," she had said. Michael didn't care. The moment he stepped inside, something about the stillness of the air and the age in the walls made him feel grounded. The first few days were uneventful. He unpacked, set up his writing room in the attic, and spent evenings watching rain drip from the porch roof. The house groaned and whispered at night, but he chalked it up to the timber settling. He even started sleeping better. But on the 7th night, things changed. It began with a soft tapping. At 2:13 a.m., Michael was jolted awake. Tap, 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 like fingernails on wood. He sat up in bed, blinking into the dark. His bedroom faced the forest at the back of the property, and through the thin curtain, he could see the trees swaying in the wind. Tap, tap, tap. Now he was sure it was coming from under the floor. He swung his legs off the bed, the cold wood biting his bare feet. The tapping stopped the moment he stood. Silence. Absolute. Not even the wind rustled. He knelt down and pressed his ear to the floorboards. Nothing. Just his own shallow breathing. Shaking it off, he climbed back into bed. But as soon as he lay down, tap, 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 it was louder this time. He jumped out of bed again and stomped on the floor. "Hello?" he called, half joking, trying to calm himself. "Raccoon convention?" No answer. Just silence once more. That night he didn't sleep. By morning the sound was gone. The house was its usual creaky self, and Michael began to wonder if he dreamed the whole thing. But something had changed. The air in the room felt heavier, and as he made his way down to the kitchen, he found something that made his skin crawl. At the bottom of the stairs, scrawled into the wooden banister in what looked like rusty red crayon, were 3 words. "I hear you." Michael stood frozen, staring at the words carved into the banister. "I hear you." He ran a finger across the letters. The grooves were shallow but deliberate. Not a child's doodle. It looked fresh. His first thought was that someone had broken in during the night. He checked every door, every window locked. No signs of forced entry. He even went around the outside of the house, slipping on wet grass as he peered into the cellar windows. Still nothing. Trying to shake off the unease, he scrubbed at the words with steel wool and cleaner until they faded. But his mind wouldn't let it go. Who or what had written that? And why did it seem to answer his question from the night before? For the rest of the day, he buried himself in work, trying to finish a chapter for a crime novel he'd been writing for months. He made coffee, played a little music, but the silence between each song felt oppressive, like the house was listening. That night, Michael drank a double shot of whiskey and forced himself into bed, determined to sleep. But the tapping returned. Tap, tap, tap. Only this time it wasn't coming from under the floor. It was in the walls. He sat up, heart pounding. The tapping was rhythmic, 3 knocks, pause, 3 more. Like a message. Tap, tap, tap. He grabbed a flashlight and pressed his ear to the nearest wall. The cold plaster sent a shiver down his spine. There it was again, faint breathing. It wasn't his. He held his breath. Someone or something was breathing within the wall. His instincts screamed to leave. But then, it stopped. No tapping. No breathing. Just stillness. He backed away from the wall and turned to go downstairs. That's when he saw the figure at the end of the hall. A silhouette, tall, hunched, unmoving, stood by the attic stairs. The light from his room caught only its outline, but Michael could make out arms, legs, and a head that tilted ever so slightly, as if watching him. He flicked the flashlight up. Nothing. The hall was empty. Michael's skin prickled. He returned to his room, locked the door, and didn't sleep until dawn began to filter through the windows. In the morning, he told himself he was just tired, stressed, that his imagination had finally gotten the better of him. But when he stepped into the hallway again, something caught his eye. A new message had been scratched into the wall beneath the attic stairs. "You asked. I came." Michael stared at the words etched into the cracked plaster. "You asked. I came." His heart thudded. He backed away slowly, barely breathing. It was no longer just strange sounds or tricks of the light. Something intelligent, something aware was inside the house, and it was responding to him. He stood there for what felt like hours, mind racing. Then something occurred to him: whoever or whatever was doing this had to be inside. There had to be a hidden space somewhere in the house, a place he hadn't searched yet. He remembered the narrow crawl space behind the kitchen. The realtor had mentioned it offhandedly during the tour. It connected to the basement but was blocked off with nailed boards. He hadn't thought much of it at the time. Grabbing a crowbar from the garage, he made his way to the kitchen. The house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that felt unnatural. He found the crawlspace entrance behind a row of dusty shelves and knelt in front of it. The wood sealing it off looked rotted, old nails jutted out like broken teeth. He hesitated, then pried them loose one by one. The boards groaned and gave way. A rush of cold air hit his face. It smelled of damp wood and something else, something faintly metallic. He shone his flashlight inside. The crawlspace was narrow and low, the ground covered in old insulation and dust. Cobwebs hung like curtains from the ceiling. It stretched farther than he expected, disappearing into blackness beneath the stairs. He ducked in, crouching low, the beam of light jittering with each movement. After 10 feet, he stopped. There was something ahead, something piled in the corner. He moved closer, slowly. It was a stack of notebooks, covered in mold and dust, tied together with string. Michael reached for the top one and opened it. Inside were pages and pages of frantic handwriting, ramblings, symbols, and crude sketches of the house's floor plan. Some pages were water-stained, others torn. One entry stood out. "It lives under the floor." I didn't believe it either, until it started mimicking my voice. Michael swallowed hard. He flipped the page. There, scribbled in shaking letters, was a warning. "Don't speak to it. Don't listen. Whatever you do, don't follow the tapping." And then he heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. This time it was behind him. He turned slowly, shining the light back toward the crawlspace entrance. Nothing there. But the tapping continued, closer now. And beneath it, faintly, almost imperceptibly, a whisper. "Michael!" Michael froze. The voice, his name, had come from the darkness behind him. But it wasn't his voice. Not quite. It sounded like him, same tone, same cadence, but warped. Like someone was mimicking him after hearing his voice only once. Too high in places, too slow in others. It was wrong. He backed out of the crawlspace on his hands and knees, dragging the notebook with him. The whisper came again, closer this time, brushing against his ear like cold breath. "Michael!" He scrambled to his feet and slammed the boards back over the entrance. Then, panting, he nailed them down one by one with shaking hands. Each strike of the hammer felt like a desperate heartbeat. He didn't stop until the entrance was sealed again. The house was quiet once more, but the silence now felt expectant, like something had been disturbed, and it was waiting. Later, in the weak safety of daylight, Michael sat at the kitchen table flipping through more of the notebook. Whoever had written it, there was no name, had clearly lived in the house before, and they were slowly losing their mind. Pages described shadows that moved independently of the light, objects disappearing and reappearing in strange places, whispers that sounded like friends, family, or themselves, and always the same creature, the mimic. It lives in silence. It learns through sound. It becomes what it hears. Michael rubbed his temples. This was insane, paranormal nonsense. But then he remembered the tapping, the breathing in the walls, the figure in the hallway. the words that responded to what he said aloud. And the voice, his own voice. That night, he didn't even try to sleep. Instead, he sat in his writing room in the attic, surrounded by old lamps and flickering candlelight, reading more of the journal and listening to the silence. Until just before midnight, something new happened. A sudden, jarring crash from downstairs. Michael jumped to his feet. He grabbed the hammer he'd left nearby and crept down the stairs, one step at a time. The air felt heavier with each level. When he reached the bottom, he saw what had caused the sound. Every cupboard and drawer in the kitchen had been thrown open. Dishes shattered. Cutlery scattered across the floor. But that wasn't what made him stop cold. On the kitchen wall, written in black ash or soot, was another message. Stop hiding. As he read it, the hallway light behind him flickered. Then he heard his voice again, this time coming from upstairs. But the words chilled his blood. I'm not Michael. Michael stood paralyzed in the darkened kitchen. The voice had come from upstairs. His voice, but twisted, mocking. I'm not Michael. He slowly backed away from the wall, hammer clenched in his hand. His thoughts swirled. Something was in the house with him. Not just inside the walls, but free now, roaming. He turned toward the stairs, intending to flee the house entirely. But when he reached the foyer, the front door was wide open. Cold air bled into the house. The mist had returned, thick, gray, swirling, and it curled around the doorway like fingers. He hadn't opened the door. He knew he hadn't. Cautiously, he stepped forward to close it, but stopped short. There were muddy footprints leading inward, through the doorway, across the floor, and up the stairs. Michael stared at them, bile rising in his throat. They were barefoot, human, but there was something wrong with the shape. The toes were too long, too curled, too deliberate. He followed them up the stairs slowly, hammer raised. Each step creaked in protest. At the top, the footprints turned down the hall toward the attic. His writing room. The door was cracked open. A sliver of warm light spilled out from beneath it, flickering. The lamp. He hadn't left it on. He approached, every inch of his skin screaming to run. But something deeper, darker, curious, pulled him forward. He nudged the door open, and stopped. There, seated at his desk, hunched over the notebook like a mirror of himself, was him. Not a reflection. Not a hallucination. It was him, wearing his clothes, same shaggy hair, same tired eyes. But it didn't move. Not at first. Then, in one jerky motion, it slowly lifted its head and turned to look at him. Michael gasped. The face was close. So close, but not quite right. The mouth was too wide. The eyes too reflective. The skin just slightly too pale, like stretched wax. And when it smiled, every instinct in Michael's body screamed to flee. Then it spoke. You're late. Michael slammed the door and ran down the stairs through the hallway into the bathroom. He locked the door, his chest heaving, ears ringing. He turned to the sink to splash water on his face. And then he looked up into the mirror, and his reflection was gone. Instead, staring back at him, was it? Michael staggered back from the mirror, crashing into the sink. The face staring back at him, his face, but not, pressed its palms against the glass from the inside. Its mouth moved, mimicking panic, as if trying to scream but making no sound. Its eyes darted from side to side, then locked with his. It mouthed the words, "Let me out." Michael turned away, heart hammering, breath catching in his throat. He closed his eyes, counted to 5, told himself this wasn't real. But when he looked again, the mirror showed only him, sweaty, pale, wild-eyed. But his reflection wasn't moving. He leaned closer. His own hand trembled toward the glass. The reflection stood still. And then, suddenly it blinked. But he hadn't. He stumbled back, unlocked the bathroom door, and bolted. The air in the hallway felt electric, charged, like the moment before a lightning strike. He needed to leave. Michael grabbed his coat, keys, and phone. He flung open the front door again, only to stop in horror. The world outside was gone. The porch still stood, the columns and railing intact, but beyond that, only a wall of black. Not night, not fog, void, an endless, suffocating nothingness. He threw a rock into it. It vanished without sound. His phone had no signal, no GPS, just static. Suddenly, he heard footsteps behind him, slow, measured, from upstairs, coming down. Michael turned toward the stairs, gripping the hammer so tightly it dug into his palm. Every step was heavier than the last, like something dragging behind it. Then came the voice, again his own, echoing down the stairwell. "Michael, it's okay now. You're safe. Come back upstairs." But Michael was downstairs. He shouted back, "Who are you? What do you want?" There was silence. Then a reply, slower, distorted. "I want. What's missing?" And from the living room, the old grandfather clock struck midnight. But Michael didn't have a grandfather clock. It hadn't been there before. It hadn't ever been there. And it was chiming backward. Gong, gong, gong. Each chime from the clock echoed unnaturally, warping the air like ripples through thick oil. The sound didn't just ring. It pressed on Michael's chest, each note heavier than the last. He turned slowly toward the living room. There, against the far wall, stood a tall grandfather clock. Its wood was darker than any natural grain, almost charred-looking, and its pendulum swung the wrong way, back and forth. But backward. The hands of the clock ticked in reverse. 11:59, 11:58, 11:57. Michael had never seen this thing before. It didn't belong to the house when he moved in. As he stepped closer, the air grew cold, thick with a coppery scent. Like blood. Shadows stretched longer than they should, curling toward him like tendrils. And beneath the ticking, there was something else. A whispering. Low, layered voices. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. Chanting in a language that scraped across the brain like a dull knife. Michael covered his ears. "Stop it!" he yelled, voice cracking. The whispering ceased. Instantly. And then, from behind the clock, something knocked. Knock! 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 Michael's breath caught. He stepped forward and noticed faint smudges on the wooden frame. Fingerprints. Bloody ones. Too small to be his. He reached out, almost against his will, and touched the pendulum. It stopped. The room fell completely silent. Then, suddenly, the back panel of the clock creaked open, revealing a narrow crawlspace lined with old wood and something else. Photographs. Hundreds of them. Stapled, nailed, carved into the inside of the passage. Photos of different people, all taken in this house. All wide-eyed, pale, terrified. Most were black and white, faded with age. But one stood out. The newest one. Polaroid. Michael reached for it with trembling hands. It was him, standing at the kitchen counter, holding the notebook. Last night, he dropped it and stumbled back, heart jackhammering. And then something moved inside the crawlspace. A hand. Thin. Gray. Wet-looking. Fingers far too long. Pressed against the edge of the clock frame, followed by the top of a head. Eyes appeared, milky, reflective, empty. And then the mimic spoke again, now just feet away. "It's not your house anymore." Michael turned and ran. He didn't stop to think. Just sprinted down the hallway, past the bathroom, past the stairs, all the way to the back door. He gripped the handle and pulled. Locked. He hadn't locked it. He never locked the back door. Behind him, the ticking of the clock resumed, louder now. But it wasn't just the clock anymore, it was synchronized with footsteps. Slow, heavy, out of rhythm with human gait. Tock, step, tock, step. He grabbed a chair and smashed the glass on the door. Cracked but didn't shatter. Reinforced. Old. Impossible. That's when he noticed the photos. All over the kitchen. Pinned to the cabinets, taped to the fridge, stuck to the walls. Hundreds more Polaroids. Every one of him. Sleeping. Eating. Sitting at the desk. reading the journal, even showering. Something had been photographing him. One photo made him stop cold. It showed him at the crawlspace, holding the notebook, and behind him, just visible in the shadows, was the mimic, its head cocked at an unnatural angle. Smiling, Michael dropped the photo and backed away in horror. The mimic knew everything, had been watching everything, recording it, trying to become him. But why? He suddenly remembered something from the journal, the page he had skimmed but not truly read. He ran back upstairs, into the attic, slamming the door behind him. He flipped through the notebook in a frenzy, scattering pages until he found it. A passage, written in frantic, jagged script. It's not a ghost. It's not a demon. It's a memory the house made flesh. Hears, learns, becomes. The first time you speak to it, it begins. The second time, it imitates. The third time, it replaces. Michael's mouth went dry. He had spoken to it 3 times. First, hello. Second, who are you? Third, what do you want? 3 questions. 3 invitations. It wasn't just mimicking him. It was trying to take his place. Just then, the door handle began to turn. Michael jumped to hold it closed, but it stopped halfway. A voice, just beyond the door, whispered, "It's okay, Michael. Let me in. You're tired. You don't need to fight anymore." It was his voice, again. But this time it sounded perfect. Identical. Too late, he realized. He couldn't tell the difference anymore. Michael pressed his back to the attic door, holding it shut as the doorknob jiggled slowly, methodically, like whoever was on the other side wasn't in a hurry. That terrified him more than if it had been violent. The mimic knew it had time. It was patient. It had already begun replacing him. From the other side, his voice whispered again. "You're not real anymore, Michael. Let me take care of the rest." The whisper dropped away into a low, inhuman hum that vibrated through the wood and into his bones. Michael shoved a chair beneath the handle and backed away, grabbing the journal. Flipping through more pages, his eyes landed on one with a crude drawing. A human figure standing in front of a mirror. But its reflection was something else entirely. Something opening its mouth wide. Beneath it, the caption read, "When the reflection speaks first, it's already too late." Michael's knees buckled. He remembered what had happened in the bathroom. The reflection that moved before he did. He had looked too long. He ran to the mirror in the corner of the attic and covered it with a bedsheet. Then he went to the window and tried to open it, nailed shut from the outside. The entire house was a cage. A thought crept into his head. An insane one. What if I already lost? What if I'm not even the real one anymore? No, he couldn't think like that. He had to be real. He remembered things, felt pain, regretted choices. He could feel the fear crawling under his skin like insects. Real fear, real person. He turned back toward the center of the attic and froze. The chair under the door handle was gone. The door was wide open, and standing in the doorway was him. Identical. Same clothes, same scratches on his arm, same wide, terrified eyes. "Michael," it said, voice trembling. "Please, you have to help me. It's pretending to be me." Michael stared at it, every muscle locked. "I'm the real one," the other said. "I escaped it. It's trying to trick you. You have to kill it." His hammer was on the floor. Between them, the other Michael took one step forward, hand raised. "Please, you know me." Michael's breathing hitched. He couldn't think. One of them was lying. One of them was not him. But which? Then the air behind him grew cold. He felt it crawling up his spine. A whisper. "You picked wrong." Michael spun around at the whisper, but no one was there. The attic was empty behind him. When he turned back, both versions of himself were gone. The doorway yawned open, black and still. The hallway beyond swallowed by shadow. The hammer still lay on the floor, alone, cold, waiting. He picked it up slowly, hands trembling, pulse hammering in his ears. The mimic could be anywhere, could look like him, could look like anyone, or worse, could already be inside him. That thought chilled him more than the cold air ever could. He staggered down the stairs, heart racing, whispering to himself, "I'm real, I'm real, I'm still me." But the house disagreed. Every mirror he passed showed a different version of him. One with a twisted grin, one silently screaming, one staring directly into his eyes, mouthing over and over, "Let me out, let me out, let me out." Michael smashed the mirrors one by one. Glass scattered like icy snow. But no matter how many he broke, he felt no closer to escape, only deeper inside. Then he noticed something else. The hallway had changed. It was longer than before. Doors had appeared, doors he'd never seen. Old ones, warped, rotted, with no handles. One of them was slightly ajar. Faint light pulsed from within, yellow, flickering, like candlelight, and whispering came from behind it. Michael crept closer. Every part of him screamed, "Don't open it," but his hand moved on its own. He pushed it open. The room was a nursery, dusty, crib in the corner, rocking horse slowly moving, and on the walls drawings, crayons and scratches and something darker, possibly blood, depicting the mimic. Dozens of childlike drawings of a man with no face. A man inside the house. Scrawled across the walls over and over, "Mr. Quiet lives in the floor. He hears when you snore. He takes your face, and then your name. Play his game, become the same." In the crib there was a mirror. Not a baby, a mirror. He approached it slowly, his reflection shaking. And then it blinked. But he didn't. And this time the reflection smiled. "You've been in here the whole time, Michael." Michael stumbled back from the crib, the reflection's words clanging in his skull. "You've been in here the whole time, Michael." He stared at the mirror, heart in freefall. What did that mean? What was in here? The house? The mirror? His mind? He stepped back, bumping into the rocking horse, which creaked forward, then abruptly snapped still, like something had grabbed it. Michael fled the nursery, slamming the door behind him. But the hallway outside had changed again. Now there was only one door. A black one, dead ahead, old and swollen with moisture. Pulsed slightly, like a living thing. Above it, carved in shaky lettering, "Name yourself." Michael stood frozen. Then the door spoke. Not a whisper this time. Not a mimicry. A voice, deep and hollow, coming from within the wood itself. "Speak your name, and the house shall know you." Michael didn't answer. The voice returned, louder, sharper. "Speak your name, or you are no one." Michael gritted his teeth. He thought of the journal of the mimic's rules. It feeds on identity, on sound, on recognition. Maybe this was a trap. Maybe saying his name would give it away, let it finish the transformation. But staying silent might trap him here forever. Then the door began to splinter, cracks spreading like veins. Bang, bang, bang. Something behind it wanted in. Or maybe... Michael stepped forward. Slowly, heart hammering. He placed his hand on the door and whispered, "Not yet." Everything stopped. The splintering froze mid-break. The air tightened like a held breath. Then a whisper returned, not from the door, but from inside his own head. "Good. You're learning." Michael fell to his knees, gasping. He looked down at his hand. Something was written on his skin, in jagged red ink that hadn't been there before. One move left. Michael stared at the writing on his palm. One move left. The letters were etched into his skin like a brand. Not bleeding, but raw, painful, alive. He rubbed at them, desperate to wipe it away. But it was there to stay. One move left. What did it mean? Was this a game? A test? The house seemed to answer him. The walls groaned low, like an animal waking from a long sleep. Somewhere below him, a door creaked open on its own. And suddenly, the lights went out. Every bulb, every sliver of daylight, gone. Total black. Then, the tapping returned. But now it wasn't below him, or inside the walls, or at the door. It was inside his head. Tap, tap, tap. He clutched his skull, shaking, as the mimic's voice slithered back in. Last chance, Michael. Name yourself, or I'll wear your skin better than you ever did. The hallway flooded with sound. Voices all his own, laughing, sobbing, screaming. Echoes of things he'd never said, or maybe had. And then a terrible realization dawned. This wasn't just a haunting. It was an undoing. The mimic wasn't simply taking his form. It was taking his past, his memories, the narrative of who he was. Michael turned, stumbling through the dark, feeling the walls, the photos, the smirking reflections trapped in every shard of broken glass. He reached the front room again. The clock was waiting, still ticking backward. 00:01, 00:00. It stopped, and then, a sound unlike any he had ever heard. A deep, guttural inhalation, like the house itself was breathing him in. He dropped to his knees in front of the clock, and saw that the crawl space behind it was open again. Waiting. Inside there was something new. A mirror, cracked, tall, covered in dust. And beneath it, scrawled into the floorboards, "Say your truth, or lose it forever." This was it. The final move. He had one chance left to define who he was. Michael stood, looked into the fractured glass, and said, "I am not you." The words left Michael's mouth like a strike of lightning in a thunderless sky. "I am not you." The house shuddered. Not creaked, not groaned, shuddered. Every wall, every stair, every floorboard vibrated like an enormous lung exhaling rot and rage. The mirror before him rippled, as if made of water. His reflection, the mimic, stood on the other side, its grin faltering, its eyes wide and full of ancient, boiling hate. Michael stared straight into it, unflinching. "I know what you are," he said. "You're not a ghost. You're not a demon. You're a parasite. You steal names, faces, memories. You hide in the quiet places, in doubt, in grief, but not mine. Not anymore." The mimic's smile returned, but now it was made of desperation. It began to speak. His voice again, but backward, syllables curling and twisting like a reverse scream. Michael raised the hammer. "I won't let you finish the story." And with everything he had, he slammed it into the mirror. Crack. A spiderweb of fractures exploded outward from the center. The mimic's image distorted, its eyes wide in shock. Crack. Michael hit it again. The reflection shattered, its face splitting, mouth gaping as if in a scream he couldn't hear. The air howled around him. Lights burst overhead in showers of sparks. The house screamed, not with one voice, but thousands, all fragments of people it had devoured. Photos on the wall curled and blackened. The nursery door slammed shut on its own and vanished. The hallway shortened, walls pulling inward like a collapsing lung. The grandfather clock twisted, let out a final chime, then splintered into ash. Michael fell to the floor, coughing, bleeding from his palms where shards of the mirror had embedded themselves. The crawl space was collapsing, boards snapping shut like a wooden maw. He crawled away, panting, dragging himself through the front door, which was now open. Outside, the darkness had lifted. The mist was gone. The sky above was gray, but real. Heavy with storm, but real. He stepped out onto the porch, and behind him the house gave one last breath, then went silent, completely. And for the first time in days, maybe weeks, maybe longer, so did the voices. There was only Michael, alone, breathing, alive. But just before he could take a step down the stairs, a whisper tickled the back of his neck. "Are you sure?" Michael froze, every nerve screaming. The whisper was close, so close it felt like cold fingers tracing down his spine. "Are you sure?" He spun around, expecting to see the mimic, some twisted shadow, or even his own reflection grinning maliciously. But there was nothing. Only the gray, storm-heavy sky and the creeping chill of dawn. His breath came out in ragged puffs. Was the house really gone? Or was this just another trick? He looked back at the door. The once grand Victorian stood silent, its windows dark, its ivy clinging to the cracked bricks like frozen veins. But the porch light flickered once, twice. Michael's eyes caught movement in the upper window. A faint, fleeting silhouette, not quite human. A face, pair of eyes, watching, waiting. The question lingered in the air. Not from the house this time, but from inside him. Was he truly free? Or had the mimic merely slipped deeper into his mind, his soul? As the first drops of rain began to fall, Michael knew one truth. Some houses don't just hold secrets. They live, and some secrets never leave. The rain fell harder now, pounding the roof like a funeral drum. Michael stood on the porch, drenched and shaking, staring at the empty windows of the house. The air was thick with cold and something else, something ancient, hungry. He wanted to believe it was over, that smashing the mirror, breaking the clock, and defying the mimic had finally freed him. But as the night deepened, a dreadful certainty settled in his bones. He turned to leave, but his foot caught on something soft in the grass. Looking down, he saw a single photograph, wet, mud-speckled, half-buried. He picked it up. It was a picture of the house, from inside, and in the window, staring out, Michael. But it wasn't him. The face in the photo was pale, grinning, and eyes cold as the darkest void. He dropped the photo. Behind him, from inside the house, came the faintest sound. A slow, deliberate tap, 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 tap. From beneath the floorboards, the house was still listening, and it always would be. Michael walked away into the storm, knowing one truth. Some houses never forget, and some secrets never stay buried.